There is something profoundly deceptive about the moments that feel like breaking. When life shakes your plans, shatters your expectations, pulls the ground from beneath your feet, your first instinct is almost always the same: something has gone wrong. You feel singled out, as though the universe paused everything just to test your endurance. It feels like loss. It feels like failure. It feels like an ending. But what if the discomfort is not evidence of destruction at all? What if the pain is not a signal that you are falling apart, but that something outdated within you is being dismantled? Because sometimes the real illusion is not the hardship, it is the belief that hardship automatically means you are losing. We grow up absorbing a quiet assumption that progress should feel smooth, that the right path should be comfortable, that success should arrive without chaos. And when reality refuses to cooperate, when doors close, when opportunities disappear, when carefully built structures begin to crack, we panic. We mourn the collapse. We resist the disruption. We label the experience as tragedy before we understand its purpose. Yet life has a strange way of removing what you have outgrown, even when you are too attached to release it yourself. Think about that for a moment. How often do we cling to identities that no longer serve us? How often do we remain inside environments that shrink us? How often do we hold on to routines, relationships, beliefs, and limitations simply because they are familiar? Comfort has a powerful grip. It convinces you that stability is safety, even when that stability is quietly suffocating your potential.
So life intervenes.
Not always gently, sometimes through disappointment, sometimes through abrupt and painful change. And in those moments, it feels like something valuable is being taken from you. But what if what is being removed is not your security, but your confinement? Because a cage lined with comfort is still a cage. The job that collapses may have been restricting your growth. The relationship that ends may have been limiting your evolution. The plan that fails may have been steering you away from something greater, but when you are inside the experience, you rarely see that. All you see is the breaking. All you feel is the uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. It attacks your sense of control. It exposes your fears. It forces you into unfamiliar territory where old definitions no longer apply. That is why so many people misinterpret these seasons. They assume that if life feels unstable, something must be wrong. They assume that if the path is unclear, they must be off track. But clarity often arrives after disruption, not before it. Consider the way nature works. Before new growth, there is shedding. Before transformation, there is breakdown. Old structures must give way for stronger ones to emerge. And human development is no different. The versions of you that cannot carry you forward must eventually be challenged, shaken, and sometimes broken. Not to harm you, but to free you. There is a quiet danger in lives that never experience disruption. Without challenge, hidden weaknesses remain hidden. Without change, potential stays theoretical. Comfort preserves, but it rarely expands. Stability protects, but it rarely transforms. Growth demands friction, and friction rarely feels pleasant. So when life begins to dismantle something you thought was permanent, resist the urge to see only catastrophe. Pause before declaring defeat. Step back from the immediate emotion and ask a different question. Not why is this happening to me, but what might this be making possible for me? Because perspective changes everything. The same event can be experienced as devastation or as redirection. The same ending can be viewed as loss or as liberation. The same breaking can signal collapse or reconstruction. The difference lies not in the circumstance, but in the interpretation. Strength begins the moment you stop assuming that every disruption is your enemy. Resilience is born when you understand that discomfort is often the price of expansion. And wisdom grows when you recognize that life sometimes removes what you would never voluntarily release, not to diminish your story, but to elevate it. What feels like breaking may actually be the tearing down of invisible ceilings, the dissolving of artificial limits, the destruction of smaller versions of yourself that could never survive at higher levels of purpose, discipline, and awareness. It may not be your life collapsing, it may be your life recalibrating. And one day, with the distance of time and the clarity of hindsight, many of the moments you once called disasters will reveal themselves as turning points. Not interruptions of your journey, but essential chapters within it. Not evidence of abandonment, but proof of transformation already underway. So when life shakes you, do not rush to conclude that you are being destroyed. You may be standing in the middle of necessary reconstruction, a process that rarely feels comfortable, rarely looks logical, but often leads to strength you could not have developed any other way. Pressure has a way of doing something that comfort never can. It reveals, not creates, not invents, but reveals. When everything is easy, when circumstances cooperate, when life flows without resistance, it is very difficult to know who you really are. Ease can disguise fragility. Calm can conceal weakness. Success without challenge can build an identity that has never truly been tested. But pressure removes the disguise. When life tightens around you, when expectations weigh heavily, when obstacles refuse to move, when uncertainty stretches longer than your patience, something fascinating begins to happen. The layers you did not know existed start to surface. Your reactions sharpen. Your mindset becomes visible. Your habits speak loudly. And the version of you that comfort allowed to remain hidden suddenly stands exposed. That is why pressure feels so intense. It is not merely the external difficulty that unsettles you, it is the internal confrontation. The moment you are forced to see what you are made of, the moment excuses lose their power, the moment potential must either activate or retreat. Under pressure, there is no pretending, no rehearsed performance, no borrowed confidence, only truth. You discover whether your discipline was real or conditional, whether your faith was strong or convenient, whether your confidence was grounded or dependent. Pressure strips away illusion with ruthless efficiency. It shows you the difference between what you thought you were and what you actually are. And that realization can be uncomfortable because many people enjoy the idea of strength more than the development of it. Strength sounds admirable, resilience sounds inspiring, mental toughness sounds attractive, but the conditions required to build those qualities, stress, difficulty, resistance, failure, uncertainty, are rarely welcomed with enthusiasm. Yet there is no other path. No one builds endurance without strain. No one develops courage without fear. No one cultivates unshakable confidence without moments that attempt to shake it. Pressure is not an obstacle to growth. It is a mechanism of growth. It is the force that stretches your limits, that demands adaptation, that refuses to allow stagnation. Think about the times you surprised yourself, the moments you endured more than you believed possible, the challenges you navigated despite doubting your capacity, the setbacks you survived that once seemed unbearable. In those moments, did strength arrive from nowhere, or was it awakened by necessity? Human beings possess extraordinary reserves of untapped capability, but those reserves rarely activate in comfort. They emerge when conditions demand them, when retreat is not an option, when adaptation becomes survival. Pressure forces you to access parts of yourself that ease would never require. And this is the paradox many fail to recognize. The very experiences we resist are often the ones that reveal our greatest power. The deadlines that stress you sharpen your focus. The obstacles that frustrate you strengthen your problem solving. The failures that humble you refine your strategy. The uncertainty that unsettles you deepens your resilience. Pressure, though uncomfortable, acts as a catalyst. It transforms theoretical strength into lived strength. Without pressure, potential remains a concept. Under pressure, potential becomes reality. But here is the critical distinction. Pressure does not automatically produce growth. It produces revelation. Growth depends on response. Two individuals can face identical circumstances. One emerges stronger, the other defeated. The difference lies not in the difficulty, but in interpretation and reaction. Pressure can be perceived as a threat or as training, as punishment or as preparation, as evidence of limitation or as an invitation to expand beyond it. When you begin to understand this, your relationship with hardship changes. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You begin asking, what is this demanding from me? Instead of seeing pressure as an enemy, you start recognizing it as a mirror, reflecting your patterns, your mindset, your emotional control, your adaptability, and awareness is power. Because once something is revealed, it can be strengthened. Once a weakness is exposed, it can be addressed. Once a limitation is visible, it can be challenged. Pressure does not arrive to crush you. It arrives to show you where you must grow, where you must fortify, where you must evolve. The discomfort is not random, it is informative. Every stressful season carries information about your habits, your patience, your focus, your emotional stability, your belief systems. Pressure speaks a language, one that communicates through challenge rather than comfort. Those willing to listen gain insight. Those willing to adapt gain strength. Pain is a teacher that few welcome, but everyone eventually meets. No one signs up for it. No one celebrates its arrival, yet it has shaped more strength, more wisdom, more clarity than comfort ever has. The difficulty is that pain rarely announces its purpose when it first appears. It does not arrive with explanations or reassurances. It arrives with disruption, with discomfort, with questions that have no immediate answers. And because of that, our first instinct is almost always resistance. We try to escape it, numb it, deny it, outrun it. We ask why it is happening, why now, why us? We label it unfair, unfortunate, unbearable. But pain, despite how it feels, carries information. It exposes, it clarifies, it forces reflection in ways that ease never demands. When everything is comfortable, there is little incentive to examine ourselves deeply. But pain interrupts autopilot. It commands attention. Suddenly, you are forced to think, to reassess, to confront realities you might otherwise avoid. Pain has a way of cutting through illusions. It reveals, yes, the fragility of assumptions, the instability of false securities, the temporary nature of many things we treat as permanent. It humbles the ego, it challenges certainty, it dismantles arrogance, and though uncomfortable, this dismantling is often the beginning of deeper understanding because clarity rarely emerges from uninterrupted comfort. Think about the lessons that truly changed you. The moments that altered your perspective, refined your judgment, deepened your empathy, strengthened your patience. Were those lessons born from ease or from difficulty? From uninterrupted success or from setbacks and struggle? Pain sharpens awareness. It teaches patience by making shortcuts impossible. It teaches resilience by demanding endurance. It teaches humility by revealing limits. It teaches empathy by allowing you to understand struggles that once seemed distant or abstract. Experiences of hardship expand emotional intelligence in ways that theoretical knowledge never can. There is a depth of understanding that only discomfort can produce. Yet pain's greatest lesson is often internal. It reveals the nature of your relationship with control. When life unfolds according to plan, it is easy to feel confident, grounded, certain. But pain introduces unpredictability. It disrupts expectations. It forces you into spaces where control feels absent. And in those spaces, you learn something critical: how you respond when certainty disappears. Some people collapse into bitterness, others evolve into strength. The difference is not the presence of pain, but the interpretation of it. Pain can be seen as meaningless suffering or as transformative experience, random cruelty, or as catalyst for growth. The same hardship that hardens one person can awaken wisdom in another. Pain itself is neutral in intention. Its impact is shaped by response. This does not mean pain is pleasant or desirable. It means it is powerful. It means it carries the potential for transformation when engaged with awareness rather than resentment. Every difficult season contains embedded lessons about boundaries, priorities, mindset, relationships, discipline, values. Pain often forces questions we might otherwise postpone indefinitely. What truly matters? What must change? What can no longer be ignored? What strengths must be developed? Comfort rarely demands such honesty. Pain insists upon it. And here lies an often overlooked truth. Pain does not only reveal weakness, it also reveals capacity. It shows you what you can survive, what you can adapt to, what you can rebuild from. Many people discover reserves of courage, endurance, and mental strength only after being pushed into circumstances they never would have chosen. Pain expands perception of self. It introduces you to dimensions of resilience that ease would never require. It rewrites internal narratives about limitation. It exposes the gap between imagined fragility and actual endurance. In hindsight, many of the experiences once labeled unbearable become proof of extraordinary adaptability. But this recognition usually arrives later, rarely during the storm. During the storm, pain feels consuming. It clouds perspective. It magnifies doubt. It distorts time, making temporary discomfort feel permanent. That is why awareness is crucial. Without awareness, pain easily becomes identity. With awareness, pain becomes experience. Difficult, yes, but not defining. Pain is something you move through, not something you become. And within that distinction lies freedom. Every hardship carries the possibility of refinement, greater patience, greater wisdom, greater emotional depth, greater strength. Pain can narrow your world through resentment or expand it through insight. It can diminish perspective, or deepen it. Its ultimate influence depends largely on whether you ask only, why is this happening? Or also, what is this teaching? After the shaking, after the confusion, after the moment when everything you relied upon seems to collapse, there comes a phase that is quieter but far more demanding: the rebuilding. And rebuilding is not as simple as many imagine. It is not merely about recovering what was lost or returning to the way things were. True rebuilding is transformation. It is a deliberate construction of something stronger, wiser, more resilient than what existed before. Yet this phase is where many people struggle the most, because once the noise of the disruption fades, reality sets in. The sympathy disappears, the distractions lessen, and you are left face to face with responsibility. The responsibility to rise, to reconstruct, to move forward without guarantees. Rebuilding requires effort without immediate reward, faith without visible proof, discipline without applause. It is a lonely kind of work. When something breaks in your life, there is often a period of emotional turbulence, anger, disappointment, doubt, exhaustion. But rebuilding demands a shift from emotion to intention, from reaction to action. At some point, you must decide that regardless of what happened, regardless of how unfair it felt, your future remains your responsibility. And that decision is powerful, because rebuilding does not begin when circumstances improve. It begins when mindset changes. The moment you stop asking whether life will fix itself and start asking what you will build next, the moment you stop defining yourself by what collapsed and start defining yourself by what you choose to create. Rebuilding requires honesty. Honesty about what did not work, about habits that weakened you, about patterns that limited you, about assumptions that proved unstable. It is tempting to romanticize the past, to view what was lost through a lens of nostalgia, but growth demands clarity. You cannot build stronger foundations while clinging to illusions about the old ones. Sometimes what broke was never as solid as it appeared. Sometimes the collapse revealed structural weaknesses you could not previously see. And though painful, this revelation is invaluable. Rebuilding on truth is infinitely more powerful than preserving comforting falsehoods. But rebuilding also requires patience. Strength is not reconstructed overnight. Confidence is not restored instantly. Direction is not always immediately clear. The process can feel slow, repetitive, even discouraging. Small steps, invisible progress, effort that seems unnoticed. This is where many abandon the journey, mistaking gradual progress for stagnation. Yet meaningful rebuilding is rarely dramatic. It is found in daily choices, consistent effort, quiet persistence, the willingness to continue despite the absence of immediate results. Brick by brick, habit by habit, thought by thought, you reshape your internal and external world. What once felt like ruins becomes raw material.
And this transformation is deeply personal.
No one else can rebuild for you. Others may advise, encourage, support, but the work itself is yours alone. Rebuilding is an internal commitment expressed through external action. It demands self leadership, the ability to move forward without constant validation, to remain disciplined without supervision, to sustain belief without reassurance. This is where character is forged, not in the moment of collapse, but in the response that follows. Anyone can feel motivated when conditions are favorable, but rebuilding tests a different kind of strength. Consistency under uncertainty, determination without guarantees, effort sustained through doubt. And there is something remarkable about this phase. As you rebuild, you begin to notice subtle shifts, a resilience that was absent before, a clarity shaped by experience, a confidence grounded not in ease, but in survival. You are no longer the same person who experienced the breaking. You carry new awareness, new perspective, new strength. The rebuilding is not restoring the old self, it is creating a new one. This is why some individuals emerge from hardship not merely recovered, but transformed, not merely stable, but unshakable. They do not rebuild replicas of their former lives. They construct something more aligned, more intentional, more resilient because of breaking, forced reflection, adaptation, and growth. And perhaps the most empowering realization of all is this: rebuilding reveals agency. Even when you could not control the disruption, you controlled the response. Even when circumstances impose difficulty, you determine reconstruction. Even when life delivered unexpected change, your next chapter remains unwritten. One of the most misunderstood aspects of growth is how invisible it often is. We live in a world obsessed with visible results, achievements, milestones, recognition, dramatic breakthroughs. People celebrate the external, the obvious, the measurable. But the most profound transformations rarely announce themselves with spectacle. They occur quietly, beneath the surface, far from applause and attention. And because they are silent, many fail to recognize them while they are happening. Real change does not always look like dramatic success. Often it looks like subtle shifts, a different way of thinking, a calmer response to stress, a new level of discipline, a deeper patience, a stronger sense of self awareness. These changes may not immediately alter your external circumstances, but they reshape the foundation upon which every future outcome is built. Growth begins internally. Before the world sees improvement, the mind must evolve. Before behavior changes, perception must shift. Before confidence becomes visible, belief must stabilize. These internal adjustments are easy to overlook because they lack theatrical impact. There are no flashing lights, no public celebrations, no instant validation, yet they are everything. The most critical development occurs underground. Roots expand, strengthen, anchor. From the outside, nothing appears to change for long periods, but beneath the surface, essential structures are forming. Without that unseen growth, visible expansion would be impossible. Human development follows the same principle. There are seasons when it feels as though nothing is improving, when progress seems absent, when results appear delayed. But unseen does not mean inactive. Silent does not mean stagnant. Some of the most important changes are psychological and emotional recalibrations that later produce dramatic external effects. Patience strengthens quietly. Resilience deepens silently. Discipline stabilizes gradually. Perspective matures subtly. These transformations rarely attract immediate recognition, but they fundamentally alter how you engage with the world. They influence decisions, reactions, persistence, confidence, and performance. By the time visible success arrives, it is often the consequence of long periods of invisible preparation. But silence can be psychologically challenging. Without obvious signs of progress, doubt easily emerges. You begin questioning whether your efforts matter, whether change is occurring, whether persistence is worthwhile. This is where many abandon the process, mistaking the absence of visible rewards for the absence of growth. Yet internal change is often slow by nature. Deep mental and emotional shifts require repetition, reflection, and sustained intention. They do not occur through sudden revelation, but through gradual rewiring, thought pate. Rens adjusted, habits refined, emotional responses recalibrated. These processes lack drama, but their impact is extraordinary. Silent growth builds lasting strength. Quick transformations may impress, but gradual ones endure. When change is internalized through consistent effort rather than triggered by temporary motivation, it becomes stable, reliable, deeply rooted. It no longer depends on circumstances or external encouragement. It becomes part of who you are. Another reason silent transformations go unnoticed is that familiarity hides progress. Living with yourself daily makes gradual improvement difficult to perceive. The mind adapts to new baselines quickly. What once required immense effort becomes normal. What once felt uncomfortable becomes routine. What once seemed impossible becomes expected. And this normalization is itself evidence of growth. The challenges that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable. The discipline that once required struggle now feels natural. The mindset that once demanded conscious effort now operates automatically. But because the transition was gradual, you may underestimate the magnitude of the change. Until you look back, reflection reveals what daily experience conceals. Comparing your present reactions, confidence, stability, and awareness to earlier versions of yourself often exposes remarkable evolution. Growth that felt invisible proves substantial. Progress that seemed absent proves undeniable. This is why perseverance during silent seasons is so critical. Many breakthroughs are not sudden events, but delayed recognitions. External results often lag behind internal readiness. The world responds after you have changed, not while you are changing. Those who persist through quiet phases position themselves for outcomes that appear sudden, but are in reality long prepared. So do not measure growth solely by visible milestones. Measure it by internal stability, by clarity of thought, by emotional control, by consistency of action, by resilience under pressure. These are the true indicators of transformation, silent gradual yet profoundly powerful. Setbacks have a peculiar way of distorting perception. In the moment they occur, they feel definitive, almost absolute. A door closes, a plan fails, an opportunity vanishes, and the mind rushes to a familiar conclusion. This is bad. This is loss. This is failure. The emotional response is immediate and powerful because the human brain is wired to resist disruption. We prefer continuity, predictability, forward motion without interruption. So when progress stalls or reverses, frustration naturally follows. But what if a setback is not always an obstacle? What if it is sometimes a correction because not every closed door is rejection? Not every delay is denial. Not every deviation from your plan is misfortune. Some interruptions are protective. Some redirections are essential. Some apparent failures are, in truth, adjustments guiding you away from paths that would have limited you. Yet this is rarely obvious in real time. When something you wanted does not materialize, when expectations collapse, when outcomes defy your intentions, disappointment narrows perspective. You focus on what did not happen rather than what might be unfolding. You measure reality against your original plan, assuming that the plan itself was flawless, that your preferred outcome was unquestionably the best one. But consider a humbling possibility. Your view is limited. Every decision you make is based on incomplete information. What you know, what you feel, what you can foresee. But life contains variables beyond prediction, consequences beyond immediate visibility, intersections of timing, readiness, and circumstance that no individual fully controls. What feels like a missed opportunity may be avoidance of unseen complications. What appears as delay may be alignment with conditions not yet present. Perspective matures when you accept this uncertainty. There is a quiet arrogance in believing every desired outcome is inherently correct, simply because it is desired. Yet experience repeatedly demonstrates that many disappointments later reveal hidden advantages. The job you did not get leads to a better one. The path that closed prevents wasted years. The timing that frustrated you ultimately proves beneficial. Hindsight exposes the incompleteness of initial judgment. But during the setback itself, patience is tested, faith is challenged. The absence of immediate explanation invites doubt. And this is where interpretation becomes decisive. A setback framed as catastrophe drains motivation. The same setback framed as redirection preserves momentum. Meaning is assigned internally before it is confirmed externally. Resilient individuals cultivate the ability to pause before labeling events. Instead of reflexively concluding failure, they remain curious. Instead of assuming loss, they consider possibility. They recognize that immediate discomfort does not guarantee long-term disadvantage. That disruption may carry information not yet visible. This mindset is neither naive optimism nor passive acceptance. It is strategic perception because setbacks often contain instruction. They reveal weaknesses in preparation, gaps in strategy, misalignments in direction, dependencies that require strengthening. An unexpected obstacle may expose skills needing development. A delay may create space for refinement. A rejection may demand reassessment. Without interruption, these adjustments might never occur. Continuous success can conceal vulnerabilities. Smooth progress can mask inefficiencies, but setbacks interrupt momentum precisely to demand reflection, to force recalibration, to prevent complacency. They compel questions that uninterrupted ease rarely provokes. Is this path truly aligned? What must be improved? What assumptions require revision? What strengths must be developed? In this way, setbacks become diagnostic rather than purely disruptive. But this reframing requires emotional discipline. The natural reaction to disappointment is resistance, frustration, self doubt, comparison with others whose paths appear smoother. Yet emotional reactions, though valid, are not always accurate indicators of reality. Feeling defeated does not confirm defeat. Feeling delayed does not confirm permanent conclusions. Growth oriented individuals resist this illusion. They recognize that present circumstances are snapshots, not full narratives, that progress is rarely linear, that detours, pauses, and unexpected changes are intrinsic to complex journeys. Redefining setbacks transforms experience. What once felt like evidence of inadequacy becomes part of development. What once triggered discouragement becomes invitation to adapt. What once appeared as halted progress becomes altered trajectory. And often, the redirection proves superior to the original intention. But superiority is rarely visible at the moment of change. It reveals itself through time. There is a kind of strength that cannot be imitated, cannot be borrowed, cannot be manufactured through appearances or words. It is the strength that emerges only after resistance, after uncertainty, after moments that demanded more from you than you believed you could give. This strength does not announce itself loudly, it does not seek attention, but when it is present, it is unmistakable because it carries weight. Strength born from adversity is fundamental. Lie different from confidence built on comfort. Comfort based confidence is fragile. It thrives when conditions are favorable, but weakens when circumstances shift. It depends on stability, predictability, reassurance. Remove those, and it begins to crack. But strength shaped by hardship behaves differently. It has memory, it remembers survival, it remembers adaptation, it remembers enduring situations once believed unbearable. And that memory creates a quiet certainty, not the certainty that life will be easy, but the certainty that difficulty is survivable, that obstacles are navigable. That disruption is not fatal. This is why individuals who have faced significant challenges often carry a distinct presence. They are not easily rattled by minor inconveniences, not easily intimidated by uncertainty, not easily discouraged by temporary setbacks. Their stability is not rooted in the absence of difficulty, but in familiarity with it. They have already witnessed their capacity to endure experience, has recalibrated their perception of threat. What once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. What once triggered panic now invites problem solving. What once provoked doubt now activates patience. Adversity, though unwelcome in the moment, expands psychological tolerance. It stretches the boundaries of what you consider survivable, achievable, controllable. And with each challenge navigated, internal resistance decreases. Fear loses some of its authority. Uncertainty loses some of its intimidation. The unknown, while still uncomfortable, no longer feels paralyzing. Strength accumulates not through theory, but through lived encounters with difficulty. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of this strength is its independence from external conditions. When you have endured instability, loss, failure, pressure, you begin to understand that confidence cannot rely solely on circumstances. External environments fluctuate, outcomes vary, guarantees are rare. Lasting strength must be internally anchored, grounded in adaptability, resilience, and self trust rather than perfect conditions. This internal anchoring is transformative. It frees you from excessive dependence on reassurance, from fear of change, from the illusion that stability requires everything to proceed according to plan. You become capable of functioning effectively even when conditions are uncertain, not because uncertainty disappears, but because your relationship with it evolves. Strength forged through adversity also reshapes identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who merely hopes to handle difficulty. You possess evidence that you can. Past challenges become reference points, reminders that previous fears were survived, previous obstacles navigated, previous disruptions endured. And this evidence alters self perception.
You speak differently internally.
You approach challenges differently. You carry yourself differently. There is less desperation for ease, less panic when plans shift, less catastrophic thinking when difficulties arise. Strength reduces emotional volatility by expanding perspective. Temporary discomfort no longer feels like permanent disaster. This does not mean adversity becomes enjoyable or painless. Difficulty still tests patience, still demands effort, still introduces stress, but it no longer automatically undermines your sense of capability. You develop a steadiness that coexists with challenge rather than collapsing under it. And that steadiness is rare. Few, because many people spend their lives attempting to avoid discomfort, to minimize difficulty, to remain within zones of predictability. Yet avoidance, while temporarily soothing, often preserves fragility. Without exposure to challenge, resilience remains underdeveloped. Wit, Without resistance, endurance remains theoretical. Strength requires testing. Adversity, though uncomfortable, provides that testing ground. Over time, those who face challenges with persistence rather than retreat cultivate something invaluable, a durable confidence, not the loud confidence of bravado, but the quiet confidence of experience, the kind that does not require constant validation because it is built on demonstrated capability rather than imagined ability. And this strength extends beyond external performance. It influences emotional regulation, decision making, stress tolerance, adaptability, patience, perspective. It stabilizes reactions, sharpens judgment, and reduces the fear associated with uncertainty. Life's inevitable disruptions lose some of their power to destabilize you because you have already been tested, because you have already endured, because you have already discovered that your limits were not where you once believed them to be. If you have survived seasons that once felt impossible, remember this: the strength you carry today is not accidental. It is earned, shaped, and real, and no circumstance can take from you what adversity has already built within you.